Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I can't see you. The lights are too bright. But welcome, and thank you for attending this evening, especially all the members of the Hunter Undergraduate Student Government, and President Rob, I believe, is in the audience. My name is Louis Frumkes, and I am the director of the Frumkes Center that creates these events. My mother was a model. She also attended Brown University when she was just 15 years old. She got straight A's and took 4 languages in her freshman year. I tell you this to point out that someone can be beautiful as well as bright. My mother was beautiful and bright. Emily Ratajkowski is beautiful and bright. The two qualities are not mutually exclusive. As you probably know, in addition to being a model, Emily published an essay collection called My Body. A number of you have purchased it out there, which became an instant New York Times bestseller. I read the book, and it is indeed fascinating. Great insights into beauty and sexuality, what it's like to seek them, and what it's like to attain them, and a lot more. You may or may not agree with Emily's philosophies. I think you probably will. But how many other models do you know that have written interesting books before they were 30? One essay that she wrote for New York Magazine entitled Buying Myself Back, which is in the book, was the magazine's most read story in 2020. Emily has also launched a new original podcast series, High Low with Emrata, with Sony Entertainment, which landed at the number 3 spot on the Society and Culture chart in its debut week. And in the past 5 years, she has also successfully translated her 28 million person following on Instagram into a successful direct-to-consumer apparel line in Amarata, all while still working as a highly sought-after fashion model. There are more interesting things you will discover about Emily when I sit down with her now and interview her. Some of the questions will be mine, and some of them will be yours. We had a whole list that were sent in from you, and I will try to attribute the question to the individual, and if I pronounce your name wrong, forgive me. Emily, are you there? This is Emily, and we're going.
Is this, okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out in the dead, cold winter.
And I am going to begin by asking you a question that probably no other interview has ever asked you. What is your favorite color?
I don't have a favorite color.
Is that true?
Yeah, I don't have a favorite color.
Not beige, not brown?
No, I like different colors at different times. I'm so sorry to give you that answer.
Let me get a little more esoteric and take something from your book. Audre Lorde, who you mentioned in your book, and who once taught at Hunter, also once said that women distrust those powerful feelings that come from the gut, from inside, way down deep. And you, in turn, said you kind of enjoy magical thoughts and feelings that come from inside. Can you speak to that for a sec?
I didn't know she taught here. That's really impressive, Nicole. She's one of my favorites.
You were probably in her class. No, I'm kidding. This is 100 years ago.
I wish. Yeah, when she writes about that, she actually talks about the way that we sort of suppress the female instinct and wisdom because it's inconvenient often. I have learned to embrace that, and one of the ways that I did that was through writing the essays. But I would say that it's a constant, and actually Audre Lorde talks about how constantly she was sort of fighting against the influences that made her want to disconnect from that part of her. But the magical realism that I write about in the book is really something my therapist turned me on to, which is just that, you know, oftentimes when you don't feel like you have control, one of the best ways to fool yourself into feeling like you do is to sort of make up a fantasy where if you step on a crack, you break your mother's back or whatever else. And I still feel that magical realism. I mean, actually, Joan Didion writes about it too. A lot of writers do. But I kind of...
Joan Didion was one of my guests some years ago here.
Wow, what a stage to be
What a
on.
stage. But you have drawn the largest audience. I wish some of them would come in. They must be
Well,
filled
it's a
up,
cold night.
that we have had in many, many years. Go on, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, so basically, even though I think that psychologists and therapy people feel like this is just like a trauma response to try to seek control, I actually am a little bit more convinced of the Audre Lorde way of thinking about it, which is that there might be some truth to it and some witchiness that is important to be connected to.
Well, let me jump ahead to something that I'm sure people have wondered. Here you are. You're 30 at least.
31.
You look about 15.
Thank you so much.
But nevertheless, a very beautiful young lady known for her attractiveness. And yet you have accomplished more in your last 15 years than I imagine the President of the United States has in his area. I mean, you've done
I don't know
more.
about that.
I mean, you've reached you've written this book, which is a wonderful book. You have a line of clothing. You're a model that has been all over the world and traveled with celebrities and have become yourself a celebrity. What I wanted to ask you is, at such a tender age, did you expect ever in your life when you were 15 or so to become this famous? And two, what is it like to be able to walk down a hallway or anywhere and know that everyone recognizes you, that every act you perform is scrutinized and watched and talked about?
God.
It's a big question.
No.
Many
I mean,
parts.
it's just, it's a good question. No, I did not think, I never wanted to be famous, and I write about it in the book. I really started modeling just because I knew it was a great way to make money. And I was actually explaining to the president of Hunter College that, you know, I went to school for fine art and was imagining some kind of career in art. And then, you know, it was right after, in 2009, the economy had completely collapsed, and I was scared of being in student loan debt, and I was like, this is so much better, going to foreign places and making money. I'm gonna drop out of school. And I really had sort of just seen modeling as a means to an end. I always expected to do something that felt more fulfilling to me, essentially, even though modeling has brought me a lot of great opportunities, which again, you know, I write about in the book, sort of the conflict I have with being so grateful to have this platform, but also feeling rather unfulfilled by fashion. And honestly, I wasn't even working in fashion. So I was just sort of like what you see online, like an e-commerce model, whatever. And then my career took off, and it was a really strange experience to have all these things that everyone in our culture we value so highly, like fame and people caring about what you wear and what you do and who you date and whatever. And I didn't feel that excited about it. I was obviously felt special, which, you know, is nice and whatever, but I just didn't feel like I was connecting to who I wanted to be. So it really wasn't until I started writing first for myself that I started to feel like, oh, this is who I am, and this is the kind of thing that I want to be doing. And then, you know, I'm so glad I published the book, because then it's allowed me to use my brain and to do the kind of things that I probably wanted to do when I was 18 before I started this career. As far as having everyone, whatever, It's really bizarre. It's a bizarre experience. It feels really weird. I'll probably never get over it. I get confused sometimes. I like when people say hi, I'm like, are they saying hi because I know them? Yeah. And I've also done the reverse only once where someone came up to said, can you take a picture? And they wanted me to take a picture of them. It was a horrifying experience. I'm always now just assume that's what I'm doing instead of taking a picture with them. Yeah, I think that ultimately I just feel really grateful that I have a platform to talk about the things that I'm interested in talking about and have an audience. You know, my mom worked in academia, my dad is a painter. They were always making things but didn't always have an audience. So I've always known artists in my life or just people who have interesting ideas and thoughts, and they can publish amazing books and no one cares. So it's really nice that people care.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me turn now to the book, because essentially that's why you're here and what we do. The book is really interesting. I mean, most people said the writing is good, this is good. I like the way you used ideas and explored ideas in a very powerful way. And you're obviously, forgive, I'm not kissing up to you, but you're obviously very intelligent, just not just a beauty. You're a bright young woman. When you write, first of all, did you enjoy writing the book? It's a collection of essays. Each of the essays, did you enjoy writing them? I mean, it's unusual for someone your age to have published essays here and essays there and then collected them into a book, which received pretty much universally wonderful notices, and deservedly so. Would you like to keep writing? Are you by any chance thinking of another book?
Yes, I would love to keep writing. I think it's the thing I enjoy doing the most. It's how people talk about exercising and going for a run and feeling like they get out this energy and they've solved a problem. Actually one of my friends who's a writer describes writing as like there's all these ideas and anecdotes and memories and things in your head, and writing is like sewing them together. And I love that process. It makes me feel, and like I said, I didn't think I was writing a book. I mean, I thought, first of all, I hate when you talk to people and they're like, I'm writing a movie, or I'm making a movie, or I'm writing a book. So I just was, I think Joan Didion said, like, you have to work harder, something like, you have to just write more all the time. So I just really enjoyed that process. It was my favorite part of the whole thing, even aside from publishing, whatever. And that book or the essay that was in New York Magazine was actually pulled from the book proposal. My brilliant agent was like, maybe we should send this out and get one of these published so that people actually take this a little bit more seriously when we go to find the right house for me to publish the book with. I love writing so much. I also have a almost 2-year-old son. I just started this podcast, and I still work as a model, amongst other things. So writing is one of those things. Actually, it's the thing that modeling, people, of course, being able to publish a book and people care about it, whatever, but the privilege that modeling actually gave me was having time and time to write. And so much of writing is just sitting and staring at a wall and failing miserably, and you can't really give yourself 2 hours to write. You have to just sort of have all this time, and it's something, actually Audre Lorde writes about it a lot in Of Woman Born, about trying to find the balance as a mother to be away from your child and also just be daydreaming, essentially. It's so masturbatory in some ways, but I really like it, and I just actually started writing something that I haven't written, and also publishing the book and having people critique it and talk about it, as wonderful as that was. It made me very self-aware moving forward and turning back to writing. So I sort of have to trick myself into believing that I'll just never publish anything again in order to write again, so that there's no pressure of how it's going to be read, because so much of early drafts are just sort of playing. So yes, the answer is yes. I definitely want to write more. I don't know if it's going to be coming in a year or something.
I was going to say, this is a nonfiction book, and I understand that because you're a thinker as well as you're in so many different things. Have you ever tried fiction, or have you ever thought about writing fiction?
Yeah, when I was doing press for the book and everyone would ask me, are you going to write more? I would say, I'm going to write fiction next, because I don't know why I felt the need to cut myself open and share every secret with everyone in the world. But also, that's just who I am. So I think I would like to try fiction. I think it's such a different beast. I would imagine what will happen is I'll write thinly veiled fiction.
Who were some of your
So unfortunately.
who were some of the writers you've enjoyed over the years? Who were some of your favorite authors or books when you were younger and today?
So my mom is an avid reader and had me reading at a very, very young age, and kind of introduced me to books that were a little over my head, even when I was really young. I remember reading Madame Bovary for the first time when I was 15 and thinking, just being like totally moved by it. But I was lucky enough to basically have the type of mom who would give me books, that you'd get in college or get to read in college. So I read a fair amount in high school and even before that. And then when I was writing the book, I really was interested in nonfiction. I haven't always been somebody I loved essays specifically, but I hadn't read as much nonfiction as fiction. So I sort of did a crash course in reading some of the best essay collections and nonfiction pieces of work. So I love Alexander Chee, How to Write an Autobiographical Novel is one of my favorite essay collections. The Empathy Exams by Leslie Jameson. What else? Gia Tolentino. I really love her essays. What else have I read that influenced the book? Roxane Gay, I think, Rebecca Solnit. And yeah, just a bunch of kind of random essays as well online and stuff. So
This is interesting. I had a list of questions that I'm not finding right this second from the, if Jillian or Sophia are there, if you would look in that dressing room where I was, you might find in my coat or somewhere there was a list of questions from the audience. I remember some of the questions, but I want to attribute the names. I'm sorry, I had these I meant, anyway. Have you ever thought of teaching? Writing is one thing, and teaching is the next step in some ways. If you write, you already have written a book. You don't want, you have a life that is so exciting, but sometimes you would like to just teach a class and have students come in.
Will you have me at Hunter College? Is that an invitation?
They would love you, and I would love you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
That's another story. I thought you were on the coast. That's tough, but you're in New York.
I'm in New York.
We can
It's
talk
not
about
a crazy
that.
commute. Yeah, my mom worked in academia, and so I know the politics of it. So I don't know if yeah, I think I could see myself at some point going and getting a degree in writing, and just for my own pleasure, basically, and then maybe turning to teaching, essentially. Like, who knows what life will bring. I think, basically, I'm interested in continuing, thinking about the things that I'm thinking about and working on the things that I do, and so why not? Why wouldn't that would be fostered so well in an academic environment? So maybe one day.
Did you get a big kick out of seeing your when you handed in the manuscript? It's one thing to hand it in. It's another thing to see the finished book and put your hands on it. Was that a kick for you?
Yes, but I had worked so, can I curse, fucking hard on it, that honestly by the time I got it, I think I got the first kind of hard copy. I had a 6-month-old baby, and you go through such an emotional process editing a book. Specifically, you kill your darlings, you reread things 1,000 times, and you get to a point where you don't even like it anymore. So right before the book was published, I had this kind of freak out moment of I actually just hate it completely. And I called my friend who's a writer who I became quite close with in the process of writing the book and publishing it, because it was so nice to have someone who understood this experience. And she was like, this is totally normal. You're not going to hate it. Eventually you won't hate it. A book is a moment in time is actually what she said to me, which it is. It's bizarre. It becomes this object that lives outside of you, even though you've made it and it's this one thing. So honestly, the craziest experience is like seeing on Instagram stories or my friends sending me pictures from the subway or whatever, where I see copies of the book in people's hands. That's really just the most amazing. That's the thing I get the kick out of. And thinking about somebody currently reading my book in Turkey or whatever is a really, it's just so, it makes me believe in art. I'm a kind of a cynical person in some ways, and it really makes me believe in art and the power of art and all of that.
Mary Higgins Clark, she died not long ago, but she's one of the great American mystery writers. And she once told me when she saw her book in print, it was very exciting, and she was getting on a plane to go somewhere, and the person on the seat next to her had a copy of her book. And at first, she was just thrilled, beside herself. You know, it was so exciting. She was waiting for the woman to say, "What's your name? What do you do?" And then she noticed that the woman was asleep with the book on her lap. Anyway.
You can't take it personally.
No, of course.
I mean, that's the thing about putting something out there, especially something so personal. It's like, I was totally prepared for people to not be interested or not like it, because that's not why I did it, you know? That's not why that's not why one should publish a book.
No.
You know, but I think a lot of people do. But I really kind of, yeah, that's why I say, like, I've basically enjoyed the process of writing the book, and I've enjoyed now when I meet someone who's read the book and they come up to me and they feel really moved. That's an amazing experience as well.
It's a wonderful experience. Very often when someone writes a book, more often fiction than nonfiction, but sometimes nonfiction, the next step is film. Someone approaches them and says, "Can we do something?" Now you were in The Gone Girl. You were Ben Affleck's mistress, were you? And you, and another film that was relatively exciting, also when you were quite young, 21, 22, whatever it is. It's interesting that your life seems to be going in some ways backward. You did all the big things first, and now you're writing. You know, I think that writing, by the way, is something. When you have a fertile mind, as you do, and you have a lot of ideas, it's something you can do until you're 95 and 100. When Sylvester is an older person, you can be sitting home still writing. Which brings me to another question with your son. In My Body, you talked about how much your mother impressed on you the importance of beauty and all that. And how will you teach your son about things like that, the physical aspects of life? Will you emphasize, because you made a big success on your own?
Which he will reap the benefits of,
Yes.
in a weird way. To the point about acting, and just before I answer that question, what I've realized I don't love about acting is the lack of control. You kind of are a player in someone else's vision, and it's like a group project. Writing's really great because, I mean, it's the bad part of it and the best part, which is that you do it all by yourself, and you have complete control. Control is a big theme of the book and a big thing in my life, and I think that's why I've enjoyed writing so much. So my parents didn't intend to impress things. You know, my mom, like I said, was a very beautiful woman, but her whole life was dedicated to her brain, her profession, everything else. She'd never commodified her image, and also, while it was a part of her identity, in some ways it was frustrating for her. I don't think it was something she wanted to teach me to value. It's just something that the world values so much. And it also is a point of pride for so many people. I do think that it's gendered. I think it's complicated, and I've thought about it's a really bizarre experience because, I opened the book by talking about my mom always calling me beautiful when I was a baby, and I look at my son all the time, and I'm like, I don't have another word. You're so beautiful. And my friend jokes with me. She's like, I told him he was also curious and strong and all these other things. And, it's not really a joke because the truth is that it is really important that I instill those other things. It's a totally new, I don't know. I think that hopefully just being who I am and thinking about the things that I'm thinking about, he will absorb from that.
You seem quite, I've only met you for the first time tonight, but you seem like a regular person despite all your achievements and so forth and so on. How do you maintain that? How come most people, if they got a movie book, would go, oh my God, and someone else, but you've done many, many, many things, and yet you seem just like a sweet, ordinary young lady. How do you maintain, how do you keep your head from swelling?
I mean, I have to say, like, nothing grosses me out more than people who are so self-interested and self-involved. And the world is I don't really love celebrity. I don't love celebrities. I don't love celebrity as a concept. It gives me the ick. And I see it all the time because I know other famous people, and they lose sight of reality. They just do, and it's not because they're not well-intentioned or good people, but like the universe feels like it revolves around them. I think because I was an only child and my parents, this is probably what my therapist would say, honestly, like I didn't want that kind of existence in my life. I didn't want the world to revolve around me. I want to be a part of the world. I want to be contributing things to the world and have things impact me and influence me. So it's just sort of a philosophical position. And then also I have really wonderful, close female friends who don't work in the industry and who could give a shit about any of that. We're friends because we're friends.
Understood. You are also a feminist. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure.
Oh, well, then I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Would you tell them a little about how you became a feminist, why you're a feminist, while I run backstage for a second and see if I can find their questions?
This is fun.
Bothering.
This is like a nightmare and a dream where you think, okay, I'm not gonna have to talk directly for. Oh, great. Phew. Fuck. Do you want me to answer that question, or was that just a filler?
Did you? Okay, you gave them a talk about.
No, I gave them nothing. I'm not sure if I'm ready to. I have a complicated relationship to feminism, although I do consider myself a feminist.
All right, let me for a moment. Thank you, by the way. Let me ask you a couple of the questions that came from some of our audience. Aksa Shahzadi asked, did writing this book make you feel lighter? Was a burden lifted?
Absolutely, that's why I wrote it. Publishing it was like another choice, but yes, it absolutely made me feel lighter. It's one thing to like process trauma. Everybody talks about processing trauma. It's another thing to make something out of it. And I always wanted to make things in general in my life. That's why when you asked me about modeling at an early age, whatever else, I always wanted to make things. So it made me feel lighter because I'd made something and produced something that helped me process my experiences and kind of make me understand the world better. So,
Ripsimi Tumanyan asks, what motivated you to launch your swimwear line? What is your, and also manage a successful life? And just go with that one.
Okay. Control. I was always being hired by usually men to make them a bunch of money by using my image, and I was tired of it. And I wanted to make some money on my own and also just be in control. So that's why I started it. It was also I just realized basically how profitable using my image could be and how little I was making from that. And I was interested in securing the bag. That's why I started it.
David Glansman asked, what advice do you have for young writers looking to tackle serious issues who aren't starting with a massive following?
You have to write so much. You just have to write all the time. Even when you don't want to, even when you think you have nothing to say, you have to write all the time, and you have to force people to read it. Just to be clear, as somebody who had a really massive following, whatever, a lot of people would say that they wanted to read my writing, and then they wouldn't. And I'm talking before it was published. I know from other people how difficult it is to get people to read your writing, and I had to. Even in a weird way, in a lot of ways, like the literary world was kind of like, okay, sure, this girl wants to write a book, like whatever. And that's why I published the piece in New York Magazine, was because I wanted people to take me seriously. I also DM'd writers I loved and asked them to read. Some of them did not, and some of them did. I just put myself out there, and honestly, I was just asking people, is it terrible? Should I be embarrassed? And also, looking for feedback, and I think that's an important process.
Sakara Carter asked, what advice do you have for people in their early 20s who haven't found their passion and aren't sure what direction to go in life?
I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I still don't totally know what I want to do. I think it's funny, people always say that, my son will do something and they're like, oh, is he gonna be a musician? Is he gonna whatever? And it's just so through the lens of capitalism and like, how are you gonna make money? What are you gonna do? But I think what I'd like, and this is, speaking from a place of privilege where I have the ability to dream like this, but also I think it's important for people to, before they think about what they want to do for a living, I think it's really important to kind of think about what you're interested in, which can be really hard to figure out. It's like dating or something. You have to, experience a lot of things before you can say, like, this is the person that I, want to be a partner to.
Absolutely.
And I think that's sort of how I think when you're in your early 20s, the way that our culture works is like you're supposed to like go to college, know what you want to do, and then get a great job, and like by the time you're 30, have a career and where your salary is going up, whatever. And it's not realistic. So I think allowing yourself a lot of time to make mistakes. I have friends who are my age who are still figuring out exactly what really tickles them, and they're doing jobs that they don't totally love, but that's part of the process,
Safia Marina asked, how do you let past trauma stay in the past so that you can live a more fulfilling future?
You don't.
You don't?
Kidding. No, I mean, just kidding. No, it's hard. I don't know. I actually made a point of not putting the word trauma in the book because I feel like it's so overused now, and everyone is so obsessed with kind of therapy speak. And I just recorded an episode with this writer I really like for my podcast, and she was talking about Octavia Butler, who was this Black woman who wrote science fiction, and everyone was it's actually a piece in New York Magazine, you should all read it, it's really great. And everyone always wanted to talk about how Octavia Butler was actually writing about slavery and race. And she was frustrated by that a lot of the time because she was like, no, I'm just an incredible science fiction writer. And yes, being Black in my experience has informed the dynamics that I want to write about in science fiction, but I don't want that to be the only thing. I lost my train of thought, but what was the question? I'm so sorry.
Let's go to another. Muffy and Penelope. Oh, you're Continuing?
No, let's continue. No, next
I
question.
was just going to, Muffy and Penelope Fleuret ask, how did your initial vision change over time?
Oh my God, I didn't have a vision. I thought I would have loved to. I love when I meet people and they say to me, I'm going to write a book by the time I'm 30. And I look at them like, how great for you. I never felt that way. I was not somebody who had a vision board and whatever. I just sort of allowed myself to organically do things. I think I'm somebody that kind of pressure of a vision would freeze me. And it's why I didn't write for a long time, was because I loved really excellent writing and didn't want to be bad at it, to make bad art. There was nothing worse than that to me. That's one of the reasons I reached out to those writers, was because I was down to just continue to write forever for myself, but I was like, maybe there's something kind of good here, and then that can change my life, and I can talk about the things I want to do. But because I am such an avid reader and because I really like excellent writing, it was really scary, because I was sure that and I still believe I'm not as talented as the people that I want to. Joan Didion said, like, you start a book and you think it's going to be perfect. You're like, before you start to write any of the words, and then already in the first sentence, you've completely ruined it. It's become small. It's just never going to be what you wanted it to be. And so you write the book anyway, and then you just hope that the next time it will be everything that you wanted it to be and capture. And that's sort of how I feel about life.
Interesting. Nicole Rajgor asks, do you feel like, due to your career as a model and large social media presence, that it was hard to be taken seriously in the literary world?
Yes and no. There were benefits to it, undeniably. Being able to reach out. But yes, there were also people who totally dismissed it. But I was prepared for that. That was my experience in life in general in a lot of ways. So I wasn't super worried about that. I just really believed if the work was good enough, then people would pay attention. And that's how I found a wonderful agent and a wonderful editor and the right house for it to be published with. Metropolitan Books and Sarah Burchtel are amazing. And it was about the content, and it was about the work, which was so important to me.
Change of direction. Sebastian Roa asks, what was the process like becoming a model?
Hell. No, it's a really brutal industry. There's no union for fashion, and you're dealing with a lot of underage girls from foreign countries. They have no rights, and pre-Me Too, it was just like a meat market. There was not a lot of respect. I mean, I still don't think it's changed that much, to be honest. I think people are afraid now to say certain things, or do certain things, because they're worried about consequences, but not because they actually understand why it's important to treat people, young women particularly, with respect. I did not do the fashion thing of moving to New York and living in a tiny model apartment and being shipped everywhere, but the agencies really take advantage. They know that the clients, the brands, are the people that are going to stick around, and they know that the models are replaceable, essentially, so they don't value protecting those people who are working in the industry, and they instead really value the clients and the photographers. And they charge you for everything. They're like, oh, you need a car for this, then they take 20% additionally. There's so many things that are really not great about the industry and still haven't been changed. It's insane to me that there's no union. But it was kind of a natural thing. I loved theater as a kid. I was doing plays, and I had an acting teacher who said to my parents, who were teachers and were worried about how they were going to pay for college and whatever else for me, she could make some money if you would sometimes go to LA, and maybe she could book a commercial. And I went to an acting agency, and they signed me. I did a little performance, and then the agent said, you should really consider modeling. I think you should go right now to Ford Models and meet with them. And I was 14, and my mom and I were like, okay. So we drove over there, and they threw down a contract, which my mom signed on the spot. And then I was living 2 hours from LA, and luckily my parents were both working and weren't interested in committing their lives to being stage parents. So, I missed a lot of school, but I was still going to public high school and living my life, which I'm so grateful for. And yeah, it wasn't until I basically got really scared of the way the world was going and about how I was gonna have the kind of life that I wanted that I decided to fully try modeling. But at that point, I mean, when I decided to do it, it's not like, oh, I was doing so well. It was, I was doing okay. I was making a better living than any of my friends who were my age. And, I had an agent who said to me, like, you'll never be able to live in New York City and work as a model. That's just not your body type. That's just not who you are, whatever. So I just never thought it was going to be necessarily a career. So there's just a lot of people who work in this industry as models in fashion, whatever. But that's my story.
Okay. Lily Ali asks, how has motherhood affected how you live your life today, especially being as young as you are? Do you feel comfortable expressing yourself the same way you did prior to becoming a mother?
Such a great question. Motherhood adds such a complicated layer for people when they're perceiving a woman. It's really interesting. It's like some of the stuff around Britney Spears, like people, the first thing they'll say about her is, oh my God, she's a mom. How could she post that? Or how could she whatever? And it really bothers me because I'm like, what does that have to do with how she is as a mother? And just sort of, listen, becoming a parent completely shifts your priorities, your identity. It fucks with you in a really profound and amazing and terrifying way. But the thing that has been so shocking to me is the comments and stuff that I get that I just never had before I had a child. That's like a whole new level of misogyny I wasn't really experiencing around, well, now you're a mom, like go home, how could you, what is your son gonna think about this, whatever. And it's just a weird thing we have about women and their identity. And I think I write about it in the book. If not, there's this amazing New Yorker cartoonist. I think her name's Liana Fick. I don't know. You should look her up, but she's amazing. And she did the life cycle of a woman. And it's like, you're, a child, then you're a sexual object, or you're not being noticed at all, then you're old, or you're a mother, and then you die. And it's like, fuck. So I think I've just transitioned into this space where people, like I'll say, oh, I have a child, and people are like, oh my God, you do? And finally my best friend was like, they literally can't wrap their head around that you are a mother, because their idea of a mother is not, it's outside of being sexually expressive. And that's really bizarre. It's like unearthed this new layer of misogyny that I guess I'd thought about before, but now am experiencing.
Several people have asked this question. Christine Calderon asks, how do you navigate your personal and private relationships being that you're in the public eye so much?
So I've taken a crazy approach that a lot of other people I know who are famous are like, why would you do that? But I just basically refuse to change my life. So, there are a lot of people who don't live in New York City because it's annoying to walk outside of your door and not have privacy, essentially, and have everybody know what you do. They don't like going to restaurants because they don't want to be on Dumois, or they don't want whatever. I'm serious. And life is too short, and I worked so hard when I was a kid. I always wanted to live in New York City. That was like, to me, that was the goal, was like have a beautiful apartment in New York City and be able to be in an epicenter of culture and whatever else. So why the hell would I then let the thing that's allowed me to have this life limit how I live my life? I won't do it. So it means that a lot of people have all kinds of inaccurate ideas about me and crazy narratives, and I also just try not to care about that, because if you do, then your life is so limited. It's like no fun. basically.
Here's a question I don't quite understand, maybe you will. Olivia Baldacci, I hope it's not the daughter of David, the great, wonderful writer. Anyway, how do you, and it sounds like a very serious question, I'm not sure I understand it. How do you practice intersectionality in your everyday life? I'm not familiar with the term, and
Intersectionality is very important. Kimberly Crenshaw, I'm looking for my book agents here, and he works with Kimberly Crenshaw, which I think is so cool. So everybody should go harass him after this and ask him questions about her. Intersectionality is interesting, especially when, in my life, I'm constantly trying to, just as a person, thinking about politics and ideas, I'm always trying to consume media that is intersectional and comes from varied perspectives. I did not grow up thinking about intersectionality. I was always super aware of race because my mom lived in the Midwest in the early 60s and had been a very active part of civil rights and whatever in her community and in her school. But as far as as a person, that's a huge part of it. I think that everything needs to be filtered through intersectionality whenever, especially as a white woman. It's a really strange thing to write a book called My Body that's truly about my experience in this body. It was, I don't know that it's an intersectional book, partly because it felt really important to me that I wouldn't one of the things I struggle with, even with a podcast, and I talk about this with my friends a lot, is how do I honor other narratives while also not trying to speak for them? And it's something I'm thinking about a lot with the podcast. But even the podcast is a perfect example. I have a varied team who's working and helping, giving their input and their insights into the things I'm talking about that are beyond my experience. So intersectionality is crucial, and it's really exciting that it's such a huge part of feminism. I do think we still have a long way to go. And it's a weird thing, I'll do talks like this, and, I think just a lot of the time, women can't, women and men, of course, but I notice a lot of white women when they're talking about feminism cannot help but just think that by telling their story, they are impacting change. And I see that because I have seen people relate to my story and come up to me, but also it's just so much more complicated than that. And I think it's really important to realize that, so.
Kara Chang asks, what is the takeaway message you would want to share with someone who has not read My Body yet, and why?
Just sum it up. Just sum it up really quick. God, I hope that the takeaway is around power dynamics and structures of power that are not always clear and obvious, that we all experience in myriad of ways. And being curious, I hope that people, their takeaway is to think about those power dynamics in every interaction they have, and where they are in that, what gives them power over someone else or privilege over someone else, and how you can be very impactful and very harmful to other people without even realizing it. And I think that, just so many, there are power dynamics that we are not constantly aware of in every single interaction.
Here's a more sensitive question. I hope you'll take it. If not, we'll go on to another. Faria Ahmed asks, how do you deal, not you in particular necessarily, but how does one deal with sexual assault?
I think the first thing to do, which seems so obvious, but I think it often is not, is identifying that whatever happened to you was sexual assault. That is, a huge step in the right direction. I personally did not have that experience until I started writing. And actually, even after I published the book, I remember the first interview I was doing was with this like white man, which is fine. But he said, the first thing he said to me was identified something in the book as sexual assault. And I got super uncomfortable because I was like, oh my God, like that's the takeaway, is that this thing that happened to me, like I wanted to capture so much nuance, and I hated it being simplified into this thing that I think ultimately just makes me feel like a victim and makes me feel powerless. And I think that's a huge part of why victims of sexual assault don't want to think of it as that, because it just makes you, how are you supposed to protect yourself and make sure that that thing doesn't happen again? But so it's an ongoing process, even for me, someone who's written a book that involves sexual assault. So I don't say that as just a throwaway type thing. I think that identifying sexual assault for what it is, because every person's experience is so specific, and when it happens to you, it doesn't feel like you. It's the idea of you don't want to believe that that's what's happened to you. So I think that is half the battle.
Caitlin asks, where do you get your confidence from? You've as much as you've achieved and succeeded in life, you've had a lot of unfortunate things happen, and you've experienced a lot of pain also. How do you bounce back? How do you maintain your aplomb and your confidence? Is it just natural, or?
No, I'm trying to think about that question. I didn't see that one coming. I mean, it sounds so basically, but I think it truly is about not thinking about how you're perceived by other people constantly. Because if you're measuring your worth in that, then it's just never going to be enough. So I think confidence has to come from actually liking yourself, and I don't mean yourself because of the way you look or whatever, how people respond to you, but because you believe you're a kind person, because you believe you are a strong person, because you believe you're a good person, and the people that you are close to reinforce that, and you love them and they love you too, and that is where confidence comes from for me.
Why do I see, almost unless I'm misreading it, a tear forming in your eyes?
There's no tear, but I wish there was.
Maybe.
Thank you. No, it's just my sparkly eyes.
Okay. There are a lot of questions that are the same as the others, and I don't want to ask you, many people ask, what is it like for a young person starting out? How do you get into writing? How do you, now here's someone who says, how do you deal with people hating on your body? And I don't know whether they mean hitting or hating your body or hitting on your body.
Hating on.
Sabrina De Nicola, are you here? No.
I don't know.
But most of them have asked like this one, what advice do you have for a 21-year-old woman who is about to graduate?
I mean, you're in the trenches, to quote Julia Fox.
That was Preet Kaur, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that when I was 20, there's so much this kind of like romanticization around becoming an adult and becoming a woman, and it's honestly not even gendered. It's like this feeling of like, okay, now you're a person in the world, like bing, the toaster, you're done, like go figure it out, and you're not going to be ready for that. That's not how it actually works. So I think that realizing that we have all these ages, right? Like 18, you're legal, 21, you can go to war, you can vote, 16, you can drive, 21, you can drink. They're all just made up. They don't actually mean anything. So the pressure to feel like an adult and to have everything figured out, it's not, and especially I think the way we think about femme-presenting people and young women as kind of like adults, and especially if you look like an adult, and people kind of treat you like one, and it can be really depressing because you're like, but I'm not. I lived with my parents 2 years ago, or whatever. So my advice is essentially to give yourself a break. I was so hard on myself, and it made me so unhappy. In my early 20s, I didn't honestly enjoy them very much because I was just like, God, you're not a fully formed person. You're not doing a good enough job. And now I look back, I'm like, well, yeah, of course. I was just trying on things and figuring out who I was going to be. So I think that would be my advice. And even the fact that people ask that question so much, to me, shows that people are being very hard on themselves.
We're just about out of questions. Emily, I want to thank you for being so candid, so insightful, and so gracious with your answers, and generous to the audience. I appreciate it. Your book is quite wonderful, and I hope all of you will buy a copy and read it. My Body by Emily, and you will enjoy it. Thank you so much for being our guest at the Writing Center. And
Thank you so much for having
coming
me.
to Hunter.
And thank you, everyone. It was the shortest day of the year yesterday. The sun went down at 4:35, so it's going to get better. That's what I heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you.